It is 4:15, and yes, that was Dr. John in the background. Good afternoon, Dr. John. How are you?
I'm great, Mick. It's great to be here. I wasn't supposed to be.
I know, we've swapped you out. Mark's a bit crook, I believe.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Mark Harwood, and that's a shame for our listeners because Mark's such a good speaker. He's really great value, and I hope he can do it next week. But anyway, they've got me.
Yes.
You know, so
well, that's not a bad thing, Dr. John. We love it when you come in as well.
So. Yeah, well, I don't mind that either. But look, it is great to have the other speakers, and I must say I was really stoked last week listening to Taz Walker because it's really great when you hear somebody who absolutely knows what they're talking about. You know, and Taz is a geologist and an engineer. And he's got a great understanding of how scientists come up with the ages that they do. You know, he really does understand that. And people generally think that they do it by the various radioactive systems that they've got available, but that's not strictly true.
Well, I've heard you say many times, Dr. John, that quite often these people who end up in the media, they just want to create an older date than the last person because they want to get in the media.
Oh yeah, that happens too, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But the thing is, there's at least half a dozen of these radioactive type methods that they use, and it's very, very rare for if they date something by all those different methods that they all get the same answer. You know, mostly the answers are all over the place.
But one of them should be close enough to pick and say, I like that
That's
one.
right, and that's exactly what they do because they really make up their mind, first of all, what they think the date's supposed to be. You know, and they do that by examining the geological structures around the place and so on. So the scientists have, and they know what date's been given to that area before. So they've got a pretty good idea what they're looking for. And when they do all the various radiometric tests, if they get one or two that come up with what they think it ought to be, well, they say, yeah, okay, well, we've got verification of what we already believed. And they can always come up with a reason why the other methods didn't get the right answer. You know, it's not difficult to come up with all sorts of various reasons. And, of course, as you mentioned before, sometimes they're pretty happy with an unexpected result if it gives a much greater age, because there's quite a bit of kudos in discovering the oldest age of something. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. But what I really wanted to talk about today was a recent science article about the age of the universe.
Yes.
Yeah. I know you saw that because I sent it to you.
Yes, and I then saw it in a bunch of other publications. It seems once one of them gets it, they all sort of jump on it.
Yeah, well, it was really interesting because, as many of our listeners would know, the conventional belief about the age of the universe is about 13 billion years. Now, it blew out to 13, decade or so ago because it used to be about 6 billion.
Yep.
But then it became 13. But this article thinks that's wrong.
Yeah.
It's got to be twice that age.
Yeah, of course.
Not 13 billion, 26 billion.
So they were 13 billion off.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, it's double what. I mean, really, it just is astonishing what they've come up with. And not only do they think it's twice as old as it was before, they think that it might be made of completely different material from what they previously thought, and that the so-called dark matter. Now, what is dark matter? Dark matter is stuff that has never been observed, but it's got to be there for the Big Bang to work.
Or for their theory to work.
Their theory to work. And the universe is supposedly, or has been up until now, supposedly made up of 95% dark matter. That is matter you can't see and you don't really know is there.
And has never been proven.
But now Dark matter doesn't have to be there.
Oh, right, okay. Yep.
Now, I don't know whether it's blowing it out to 26 billion gets rid of the dark matter, but now we don't have to have dark matter or dark energy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, 95% of the known universe was supposedly those things, but they've just disappeared without a trace.
So we should see all of the textbooks now completely change.
Well, that's if this particular theory gets off the ground. Mm-hmm. Now, where did they get it from? Well, they got it from data that they're getting from the James Webb Telescope. Yep. Because, of course, that's a very, very new thing that's gone up there. And, of course, the things that are coming out from the James Webb Telescope are overturning what was previously thought. And what they've noticed is, they've known for a long time that there was what they call a redshift in the light from all the distant stars. Mm-hmm. And what they mean by a redshift is that the light from them is shifted towards the red end of the spectrum. Yep. And what they have believed that meant is that the universe is expanding. The stars are actually going away from us. Mm-hmm. That's what they previously believed. But this new research suggests that maybe that's not right.
Okay.
So there has to be another explanation for the redshift. Mm-hmm. Well, at Creation Ministries, we've always known that was wrong anyway, because there are things called, I think, quasars that are obviously linked to some of these particular redshifted stars, and they don't show the redshift. So, how can you be attached to something and both be moving away, but only one of you is moving away? It really doesn't make sense. And look, I think we can safely say that although cosmologists might speak authoritatively, and they seem to know what they're talking about, to make such a dramatic claim that our whole understanding might be wrong, that it might not be expanding, that the so-called dark matter and dark energy might not exist, and that the age might be twice what we previously thought. I mean, that is that's a pretty big shift in thinking.
Yes.
And I think anybody who puts their trust in cosmological science for their beliefs about long age and evolution is really putting that trust in pretty flimsy, ever-changing evidence and theories. Yep. And, we come back to what the Bible clearly teaches, and this is definitely what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. The Bible says nothing about millions and billions of years. It says that our universe is about 6,000 years old.
Yep. The interesting thing is, Dr. John, there's been this new news coming out in so many publications: Cosmos Magazine, Physics.org, Penn Today, that's university. It's now on Wikipedia, Yahoo News, and the list goes on. Yeah. They're all sort of going, oh, look, we've found this incredible change. But basically what they've said is everything we've said before was wrong.
Right.
And we've just come up with something brand spanking new.
And now that's obviously right.
Which must be right, which is sort of what I think it's been years gone by where we've been talking and almost the same things happened. It's they've changed their mind again.
That's right.
Yet everyone still focuses on what they say as opposed to what the Bible's always said and hasn't changed.
Well, that's right. Not only does the Bible talk about the age being about 6,000 years, but all the evidence that we can see right in front of our very eyes is consistent with what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. The Bible also says that there was a global flood about 4,500 years ago that covered the whole earth and drowned all the animals and people who weren't in a big boat that kept them safe. Right? And what do we find? We find the remains of all those dead animals buried by their millions in sediment which could only have come from a massive flood. Yep. And the scientific world says that flood never happened. right? Now, the interesting thing to me is that they deny that the flood ever happened on Earth, where there's plenty of evidence, and they're standing on the Earth and they can see the Earth with their very eyes, but they think that there's been a global flood on Mars, to which they have never been, and the only evidence they have comes from a camera attached to a very expensive little dinky toy that has run around in circles on a very, very small part of the planet.
Yeah.
So, isn't it astonishing? Here we have all this evidence of a global flood on Earth, but they don't want to believe that. And negligible observational
evidence
of a global flood on Mars, because we've never been there, but they want to believe that.
Yes. Well, I've got to say, Dr. John, some conversations we've had in the last 12 months, particularly about those little tiny living machines, the little things that are inside our cells, those things that are just so intricate but amazing. When you see them, and we actually posted some pictures like way back of these things, when you see them, and I think that these same guys that probably came up with these new theories, if they saw that, they look at this now and they think, wow, it couldn't evolve to that level in the short amount of time that we've given it.
No.
We've got to increase this timeline a little bit.
Yeah, and the other thing about all those not micro, nano machines that we've got inside of us, their efficiency is almost 100%. I mean, it is just fantastic. Now,
and they have been, like science has said yes to those things. They know they're there.
Yeah. Yeah. They know they're there, and they know that their efficiency is 100%. Now, we can't make machines that have 100% efficiency. It's just impossible. It just, and especially not miniature machines like that. It really is just amazing. But look, getting back to some of the things that we observe, and I'll come back to this a little bit later, when we have a look at those carcasses of these animals that are buried in sediment, we find other things that suggest that a long age that they're talking about is just impossible.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll talk about that when we come back.
Absolutely. You're on 94.9. We're with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. If you have any questions, please send them through to our text line 0401 949 949. We have Dr. John in the studio from Creation Ministries International. He's happy to answer your questions. If you have any, send them through to our text line 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. John, you're talking about sort of ages and, finding all these bones underground and, of course, so many dinosaurs that, could have been sort of just squished in the flood by the massive weight of silt and stuff. I have a bit of a question. We often see flags, particularly from, European nations, flags that have pictures of, like, dinosaurs on them. And these are olden-day flags. They're not current flags. And they have dinosaurs that look very much like the dinosaurs that are now drawn up by paleontologists that go to great lengths and spend years digging up a single skeleton to finally figure out what they look like. How would those people have known way, way back then? They didn't have the technology we have today to even dig the bones up the way we do. Even if they tried, they would have dug up this mash of bones. How do they know what they look like?
Yeah, well, look, Mick, this is one of the arguments that we've been putting forward at Creation Ministries for years, that because all around the world, as you say on flags, but you see on rock drawings and carvings and paintings and all this sort of stuff, you see these images that have been painted by people centuries ago, long before fossils were being discovered and dug up. And how is it that they drew things that we would call dinosaurs unless they'd actually seen them?
Yep.
And this is our argument. That they weren't familiar with the fossils, so they must have actually seen the live animal. Now, the world doesn't want to believe that, because it wants to continue with the foolishness that these animals like dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, when all the evidence points out that's impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from what you've just described of people drawing pictures of them many, many centuries ago, when some of the fossils are dug up these days and they dissect them, what they find is that some of them have even got soft tissue in them. Even a T-Rex fossil had red blood cells that could be squeezed out of a blood vessel. Now, that's just ridiculous to say it's 65 million years old, because they can't last that long, and we believe, as the Bible says, that it's only a matter of thousands of years ago. In which case you can expect that there might be such things preserved. But if they're 65 million years ago, then obviously that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And even some of the radiometric testings that they use have demonstrated that they can only, scientifically, they can only be a matter of thousands of years old. They can't possibly be millions of years old, otherwise you would not be able to detect things like radiocarbon in them.
Yeah.
It's just scientifically impossible.
But when you say that they can actually squeeze blood, basically,
yeah.
I mean, you can get DNA out of that.
Yes, the DNA is a bit denatured, but they have been able to get some dinosaur DNA out of some of these things. So all of this, and DNA is known not to last that long. So when they find that, what the scientists try and come up with is an explanation as to how it could have lasted that long. They don't think of, or they don't want to think of the obvious explanation, which is it's not that old.
Yes.
Because if they came up with that it's not that old, then there may be a creator God. It would be too inconvenient a truth for them to.
They might lose their funding.
They would not just lose their funding; they'd be ostracised from their peers, because they don't dare make that sort of statement that we could be completely wrong about these millions of years. Because if they acknowledge that the biblical time frame could be true, then they are acknowledging the possible presence of a creator God. Now, they don't want to do that, because that might mean that they have some responsibility towards them, towards him. So really, that's an absolute no-go area. And this is one of the things that we're really on about, because what they have done with the explanations of all of these long ages and evolution is they've blocked off lots and lots of people from actually coming to the realisation that there may be a God.
Yeah.
And when you get to the point of knowing that there is a God and what his word says, then you know that there is going to be an eternal existence after the one we're in now. And really, you definitely don't want to be on the losing side in this game of life. You only get one go, and when the final siren goes, if you're not on the winning team, then you're going to be in trouble.
Yep.
It's not like the state of origin where you've got 3 games and it's a best of 3.
Yeah.
It's only one game here, and you've got to win it. You can't afford to lose, and because losing means an eternity lost. And that's a very, very frightening situation. And unfortunately, it's if it wasn't so serious, it would be quite humorous. But it is deadly serious. And one of the things that really bothers us at Creation Ministries is we mentioned before how there seems to be this competition really to find the longest age. And here we are in Australia. The Bible tells us that apart from the flood 4,500 years ago, there were only 8 human survivors of that, and they were all the one family. And for a couple of hundred years after the flood, they were all together with the same language. And they didn't disperse everywhere across the world until God confounded their languages and then divided them up into paternal tribal type groups.
Yeah.
And that made them disperse all over the world. And that was only about 4,000 years ago, according to the Bible. Now, we believe there is absolutely no doubt that the biblical time frame is true. But here we have this idea, particularly in Australia, of the indigenous people being here for 50,000, 60,000 years.
Yep.
Now, that can't possibly be true if the Bible is true.
Yeah.
Now, we don't mean any disrespect to the Aboriginal Australians. I mean, they obviously were the first people here, and they certainly were dispossessed of the land against their will. So, we don't deny any of that. But we do deny the time frame because the time frame is impossible if the Bible is true, and we believe that all the evidence points to the Bible being true. And when you think about it, the Aboriginal people did not keep a calendar of any sort. They weren't like the South Americans, like the Mayans and the Aztecs and so on, who did have calendars. The Aboriginal people did not keep a calendar. And all they knew was that they had been here a long time. Well, how long's a long time? You don't know. And it's the white man who's applied these radioactive dating techniques to campfires and rocks and things like that, who's come up with the idea of, initially it was 10,000 years, and then it got to 20, and then it got to 30, and then 40, and so on. And we see this escalation in time frames purely on the basis of these very, very questionable radioactive dating techniques.
Yeah.
So that's where the 50,000 years has come from. It hasn't come from an Aboriginal calendar. It has come from the white man's very, very questionable dating techniques.
Yes, yes. Dr. John, we're at the end of another awesome week. That was it was fantastic, and we look forward to seeing you. Well, maybe in a couple of weeks, by the sounds of it.
Yes, I was to be here next week, but I think Mark Howard might be back. I hope he is, because our listeners really need to hear Mark. He's such a good speaker. So I hope he's well again next week, but if he's not, then you might have to put up with me again, Mick.
That's good. You're on 94.9. Look, if you do have any questions for Dr. John or for Dr. Mark Harwood next week, just send those questions through to our text line 0401 949 949. You are on 94.9.